Welcome to the Connected Life Book Club podcast with Summer Shepherd.
That's me.
And Nikki Corbin.
Hey.
Welcome to your place to connect with a good book, with God, and with each other. The Connected Life Book Club podcast.
Welcome back. It is season 5 of the Connected Life Book Club. I'm Summer Shepherd, and I'm super excited for this. I've missed this. I've needed this. I think we can all agree that 2020 was a pretty wonky year, like all around. And one of the things that got missed by so many people was that sense of community. And so we knew that even though everything had changed, we really wanted to see this book club happen again. So many of you connected in a big way to the first 4 seasons. So now that we're in season 5, it looks a little different. And so before we go any further, I kind of want to explain some of those ways that things are different. And the first is that my co-host is not Candace. So Candace was on the first 4 seasons with me, and she and her husband Andrew headed off to greener, warmer pastures. They are actually spending the next year at least kind of exploring Central, South America, the Caribbean, and finding somewhere to land. And so if you want to find out what she's doing and follow along, they are on Facebook. If you search for Soul Searchers, it's SOL, like the Spanish word for sun. Isn't that cute? Soul Searchers. And you can follow along and live vicariously through them. But what this does mean is that I have a new co-host to introduce you to, Nikki Corbin from Duluth.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you're here. So she is the station manager at one of our sister stations, part of the Northwestern Media Network. And she's going to be joining me for this season. And then next season, we'll meet a new friend. And that's kind of the model we're going to follow from here. And so Nikki's here. And if you want to get to know Nikki a little bit more, she put a Getting to Know Me video up on our Facebook page, which if you're not already connected to, y'all, you got to get there because that's where so much of this community happens. You can request to be approved for that group at Facebook. Just search for Connected Life Book Club. But Nikki, welcome.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here. And I know Candace well, too. She actually started in Duluth. And so it's been fun to follow her in her journeys. And it's fun to follow her now in this whole podcast journey. So this is so fun. And what a book we started with.
Oh, my goodness. If you guys, I hope everyone's picked it up already. But if you haven't, that's okay. You can always grab it, come back and listen to it when you have it in hand. But we're studying Lost Women of the Bible by Carolyn Custis James, which is a book I didn't know I needed, but I think I needed. And so we're going to be going through this like we have in the past week by week over a 6-week period. And we are exploring just a lot of women that maybe we've heard of and studied at church, but likely we haven't. And just some really cool takes on their journeys and how we can relate that to us today. And so for this week, Nikki, we are just jumping into the introduction, which even though it's just a couple pages, ended up being a lot richer than I was expecting.
Yeah, me too. I have to admit, a lot of times I just skim through the intros. But this one, I couldn't do that. There was just so much meat in there. It was so good.
Yeah. My poor husband, I often read at night in bed as I'm falling asleep. And so there was so much I needed to highlight. So he's trying to sleep. And every 5 minutes, I'm turning on the light. I'm highlighting something. And I'm like, sorry.
Right.
Because I couldn't wait. I was afraid I would forget something important. There's a lot of good in here. Now, as you're reading through this on your own, you'll notice that at the end of these chapters, there are discussion questions that are included. Now, when we've had this in the past, we haven't put out our own discussion guides. This time, we're doing a little bit of both. So we're going to throw out, 2 or 3 questions for you each week, and then we're going to hit on some of the ones that are in the back of the book as well. So we're going to jump on into this. So let's go ahead, Nikki, and we are going to start with the first question on our discussion guide, and then we can hit some of the questions that we liked that the book offered. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
all right.
Works for me.
Let's do that. Let me make sure I have mine up in front of me here because, I'm not always prepared when I need to be prepared. And all right, here we go.
You're a busy mama. It's okay.
Yeah, that's to say the least. My kids are sledding outside the window and I'm waiting for them to break a leg and interrupt us. So let's all pray that doesn't happen. Okay, so here we are. How did the picture you had, Nikki, for your life alter from what you thought it would be, leaving you feeling lost?
Oh man, I actually kind of sat on this question for quite some time because, this whole first chapter honestly kind of shook me a little bit because, we really are talking about those expectations and those, cultured expectations at that. So when I was wrestling with this question, it was different than what I had expected to say, but I remember so I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. It all kind of happened fairly early, so it felt like I was following that traditional role. I had a stable job at this point, and it was one that my husband had actually suggested to me, and it was good. But there was a distinct moment where God was like, "You are made for more." And I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know where that was going to lead me, but I was like, cool, let's do this. Let's go on this journey. And so I started, I thought it's my job. It has to be my job. And so I started applying at all these different places, and I had never at that point had an interview that I didn't get the job. So I thought like, oh, I'm a shoo-in, whenever I had an interview. Nothing worked out. It literally was years. And I was just like, God, where are you? Like, what is this? So I'm supposed to kind of go on my own path here, which is not what I expected. I thought I was on that, traditional good path, and really feeling like he told me elsewise. And here I was, nothing happened. And so I even tried to push, and I'm like, okay, well, I have to get better. I have to go to grad school. I have to do this. And I started trying that, and it wasn't getting me anywhere until, of course, God's timing. And I ended up, I'll tell you that story another time. It's kind of a long one, but it's a pretty cool one. But I ended up at the station I'm at now. And it was totally a God thing. And I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. But I felt so lost during those years that nothing seemed to happen. I was like, where are you? You told me. So I was diverging from what was normal. And yeah, that was my lost time, but he ultimately redeemed.
That's awesome. And he always does, right? If we give him enough time, we can trust that he's got a plan. But that moment of waiting, or moments or weeks or years or decades, I mean, that's what really shows us what we're made of. It's what do you do in the waiting when things are slow to come? And I know for me, I'm not a very patient person. It's a virtue that I hope to acquire sometime before I die. But for me, my life, my story, I guess, was very different from pretty early on. So like I grew up in the church, but then I walked away. And so when I was in my early 20s, when all the girls I went to church with are off looking for, sweet little husbands, I was partying. I was building my testimony, as I like
there you
to
go.
say, And so I came back to the Lord when I was already in my 20s. And so when I went to Bible college, I, felt led into ministry. I was single. I didn't know what that was going to look like. But I was older than everybody else. So already I just felt this weird dissonance because the girls I was studying with, I mean, one of the things, I went to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and it was like a not so funny joke because it was so true and kind of sad. But a lot of the girls that went to that school, they say, aren't there to get like their BA or their MA in ministry. They're there to get their MRS. They're there to find a husband. Moody Bridal Institute. And so, there was just this pressure all around to like get married. And when I was a year or two in, I was dating someone, and eventually we did get married while I was at the school. But again, there was just this different perspective I had, I think, as an older student compared to what the other girls around me were going through. But then when I got married, even though I was fitting into that, quote unquote box for women, my dynamic in my marriage, Nikki, was very different than what I'd expected it would be. So, I love to study. I love to be very intellectual. I'm a very driven person. I'm a big dreamer. I have a lot of plans and stuff. And my husband, whom I absolutely adore, is just not like that. He's much more steadfast than I am. His gift is serving. He loves to serve people, right? He's much better at keeping our house clean and cooking than I am, and so
I feel like you're describing my husband too.
Right. Well,
And
for me though, as a woman, that was really hard sometimes.
True. Yeah.
Because we buy into that, like, well, that's a woman's job. That's the woman's role. You're not supposed to be the quote unquote stronger one in the marriage. And I wouldn't even say that I am. We're just strong in different ways.
Right.
But for me, that left me feeling, I guess, a bit lost sometimes until I had a better grasp on what it was that God had for me. But that wasn't what I pictured my life would look like at that time. And there were specific moments, like you were saying, where I just felt like God was leading me to something and then slammed a door in my face. My journey into radio, which may come up at one point, was exactly that. I found myself out of radio for like 3 months wondering where I took a wrong turn until he invited me back and made it clear. But yeah.
Yeah. As you're talking about that dynamic, I can't help but think, so I remember very distinctly, I was pregnant and I was sitting in this room and it was like a community center and a group of girls came in and they were having the time of their life, like giggling at nothing. And I was like, oh, how fun for them. And I immediately prayed and I said, Lord, please do not give me girls. Like, I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know how to be a girl mom. Like, please don't give me girls. And he gave me 3 of them. And I still don't know how to French braid. I still don't know. But I have found over and over again, that even though I may not be that typical girl mom, so to speak, all you really have to do is teach them to be themselves and love Jesus, right? I mean, then the rest will come along as we go. But yeah, I guess if we're talking about expectation in that realm too, boy, that was me. I'm not your typical girl mom. And so that was one of those things that I had to wrestle with. And I felt shame for a long time until I could be like, does it really matter?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, no. And that's one thing I learned very quickly is you never tell God what you don't want. Because I always said, I don't want a baby that is born around Christmas time because I'm like, well, that's going to be just hard to manage. And my second daughter is born the day after Christmas. And I told God, and this is maybe awful, but I'm like, I don't want twins. Twins just sounds hard. Twins sounds overwhelming. And I now have, 4.5-month-old twins.
And they're beautiful.
And I love them. And of course I would never go back. He knows better than we do, but I learned early on not to tell him what I don't want for sure.
Yeah. Laughs in our face. Kind of funny.
So I think we, in some ways, kind of even touched on question number 2, which was, when have you felt conflict between who God made you to be and the traditional view of a woman's role in church or society?
Yeah. So immediately I went to my position now where I'm at because I'm station manager of a Christian radio station. And, there are people that they think that's awesome. And there are people that, are saying that's not a traditional role for a woman, and there's moments in time where I have experienced lack of respect, and, it's kind of a man's world where I'm at right now in this level. And so it's definitely one of those things where it's like, I know God put me here. Like that whole journey, that's totally been God. And it's been so funny just watching him work, but then also at the same time, watching him kind of challenge us in these ways and challenge that norm because I'm here only because of him. And so clearly he's working through me and people just have to be okay with that. And that hasn't always been easy.
I mean, I'm not in a position of leadership like that. Like I'm not over a team of men like you are, but I get that too. Just being in ministry, sometimes it's tricky. Because I remember when I was studying to be a missionary and I'm at Moody and I'm, learning how to teach the Bible, I was told, we're like, okay, well, that's great. So you can, teach women and children. Those are your options. Like you don't really have anything to offer men. And this wasn't my teachers directly that said this. I don't remember who did, but when I had asked somebody, what are my options as a woman? Because I was a fairly new believer when I went to Moody. And so as I'm studying, deep eschatology and how the church works, and I'm like, well, what do I have to offer in that kind of environment as a woman? And someone said, well, you can lead children's ministry or you can work with other women. And those are valid and important roles. But I just felt like as someone who's on air, who's talking and reaching both men and women, I felt that rub a little bit sometimes. It's like, well, I really want to share this truth. I really want to go there and I want to talk about Jesus and what he's been showing me. And, but is this me overstepping some boundary and teaching men when I'm not supposed to? I mean, just these limits that we felt, which I love how she, really talked about that. And let me find the quote here because I don't want to misquote the book we're studying because everyone will know if I do because they're reading the same book we are. It seems that either we are out of step or the Bible is. When we look at how we've been made, and it's like, all right, God, how does this work? You've given me the strength, this desire to teach, this knowledge. I believe wisdom and an understanding of your word. Is it really just so that I can raise up strong children? Not that I don't ever want to diminish that role. It's the most important role I have in ministry is raising my family. But is that truly it? Because there are so many people who would interpret the Bible as saying God is keeping women down. And I think this opening really kind of helped challenge some of that in ways that I hadn't expected.
Right. I mean, God used women in a lot of different ways. And I'm so excited to kind of just read about these lives and the situations that they were in so that, they're relatable. And then also how God has really shown through them and has taught us and men things through these women. One of the things that she talked about too was perspective. And I like highlighted the whole thing basically because that's a takeaway for me was this perspective of, she said, she used that example of the deaf man who showed her a side of Jesus that she as a hearing person hadn't observed.
Yes.
And so it's this perspective, like what are we just as humans? I mean, men, women, children, what are we missing because we're only looking at the Bible out of our own lived experience? So I say I can learn from men, because they have their lived experience and this is what they have learned. And then what about us though? What about us as women and all of the different life experiences that we've had and how we've encountered Jesus and what that's meant and, how we are, processing the Bible and what we're reading. And so there's so much value to that perspective. And so if we ignore women in the Bible, we ignore that whole perspective and that whole opportunity to learn and to grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was studying intercultural ministry, that is something that really stuck out to me because as an American kid, I grew up in American churches that did church in American ways. But to be, studying alongside people from different cultures, but studying the different cultures themselves and recognizing that worship in these cultures, church in these cultures, it looks very different, but we're worshiping the same God. Right. And just embracing the beautiful tapestry that is the church, the colorful and diverse tapestry. And so I think that being reminded, which, of course I know there's value in what I have to offer as a woman, but hearing her put words to some of those doubts and struggles that I confess that I've faced in the past was really refreshing and got me really excited about the rest of the book. And now I wanted to share a quote from another book, and I hope that's not cheating, but while I've been reading this, I was reading a book for my other podcast, and there was a quote. So this is the book, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. And in it, she talks about that struggle that we can feel for femininity and how femininity looks to society and how being feminine includes terms like being thin and nice and modest and playing it safe. Like those are quote unquote feminine characteristics, and how even in the age we're living in where women are encouraged to be empowered, we still feel that rub. So she gave a couple examples that we believe that we shouldn't make people feel uncomfortable, but we should be honest. Don't upset anyone or hurt anyone's feelings, but say what's on your mind. Sound informed and educated, but not like a know-it-all. Don't say anything unpopular or controversial, but have the courage to disagree with the crowd. Where I feel like, and that's specifically for women. When we see little girls and they are taking charge, they're not leaders, they're bossy, right? And so breaking that stigma and still honoring how God made us different and how God made us special and uniquely gifted. And so that's one thing I'm really excited about for this book.
What a great like visual too, or examples of real life stuff that, I mean, we're not touching on Brene Brown in this book, that we're reading, but those are real life situations. And so we get to look at these women and going through real life situations that, although the culture was a little different back in their time, we certainly relatable with now. And so I'm super excited to also go through some of this stuff and just kind of work through that. What does God have for us? Like, what does God view women as instead of what does the culture view women as? And what does that truly mean for us? So I'm just so excited for this book.
Me too. And so in the end, there are some discussion questions that Carolyn gave us herself. So going through these, did any of these jump out at you and kind of help you explore deeper that you want to touch on?
I was actually, after reading Psalm 13, it was quite encouraging, to be honest, that, thinking that King David had these same struggles. One of the things was like, what questions did your struggle raise about yourself or about God? And as I was thinking through some of those times in my life where I have struggled, it's like, and I felt lost, and where's God? He's asking those same things. Lord, did you forget me? Like, where am I? How, where are you in this? And am I going to be here in this despair like forever? And boy, did I remember feeling that when I was waiting on him. I was feeling lost. I didn't know, was I going down the right path? Did I hear him right? Am I supposed to, pursue my own thing instead of being that, just obedient housewife kind of a thing? And so, boy, that was encouraging to hear that it's not just me wrestling with those things,
I love that about Psalm 13 too. So like even just the first couple verses, it says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take my counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day?" Now, I got to admit, when I was younger, I'd read Psalms and be like, oh my gosh, they whine so much.
Right. How dramatic. It's so dramatic.
And I was a theater kid, so that said a lot. But, as someone who's now had some life under her belt, I get it. And I feel those struggles specifically when I am trying too hard to fit into a box I think I'm supposed to fit into.
Yep.
Or I'm chasing something that I want. And I just feel like, look, God, like where are you? Because I'm not taking the time to really appreciate and understand what he has and how he's made me. And I can look back in my life and see time and time again where I've had to kind of come back with my tail between my legs and be like, okay, I get it now. And please help me not find myself in that place again. Inevitably, I find myself in that place again. And inevitably,
over and over,
I sound just like King David, the guy I judge so much for being a whiner. And that's real life. So I really liked that perspective too, that this is coming from not just a king, that even kings have these kind of struggles, but this is a man. We're talking about women, but like this isn't just a struggle, that struggle for identity and direction and belonging. That's not something we alone face, but we do face it. And I think that this is going to take us on a really fun journey as we explore that together.
So what about you? Is there a question that kind of stood out to you?
Well, I was going to go for the Psalm 13 thing as well.
Oh, I stole it.
No, it's good. That's good. Well, I think a lot of the questions have to do with our interpretation of that. And, but what I also think is nice is question 6 says, why are we sometimes reluctant to ask these kind of questions?
Because that was going to be my next one.
Because here's what I think is true about that kind of spiritual whining, where it's like, we have those thoughts, but we're afraid to bring them to God because we do feel like whiners. We do feel like we're struggling and that's not fair. And that somehow that reflects a lack of faith. But when I came to the Lord at 22, that was a promise that I had made to him and to myself, was that I'm done faking it. Like, he knows our doubts. He knows our struggles. He knows our questions. He's big enough to handle them. And when we don't bring those out to him and give him a chance to speak into those struggles, that's what demonstrates our lack of faith. Because that's what shows that we don't trust that there is a strong answer. At least that was true for me before I really bothered exploring my faith. And so I think my own insecurity keeps me from expressing to the Lord just how insecure I am. And I think that is a commitment that I need to make to let that go.
Yeah. Growing up, I kind of grew up just as Christianity was kind of more of an image thing. Like you did it so that you would appear to be a good person, not necessarily like that relationship with Jesus. And so really a turning point in my faith journey was actually in college, kind of similar to what you're saying. It was when people actually invited me to church and I was like, wait, you want to go? Like, your parents don't know that you're going. Like, is this okay?
Yeah. You don't have
so
to
I
go.
went and then, I had the realization that it is a relationship. Like, Jesus is real and he wants to be a part of your life. And then so fast forward a little bit too, a few years as I'm going through that initial journey, I had a moment where I was so angry in my life. I can't remember at the time what it was happening, but I like yelled at God. I was like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this happening? I'm so mad. And it was almost like just one of those breakthrough moments for me. Like, okay, he can handle this. He can handle my crazy. There isn't necessarily this right way to pray. Like, of course we want to thank him and praise him and all this stuff, but he wants the real talk, because like you said, he knows anyway.
Yeah.
So he knows when we're faking. And so it's like, don't save your emotions for other places, because that's where the real healing begins and the real like transition can begin, and he can really dig in there.
Yep. I mean, that was one of the most frightening and freeing discoveries I made, was that God knows me completely, right? Like, he knows those innermost thoughts, the darkest thoughts. Yeah. He knows me completely. There's nothing I can hide from him.
That's scary.
But he loves me anyways.
Right.
Like, in the midst of the dumpster fire that is Summer Shepherd, like, he loves me anyways. And there's nothing I can do to change that. And so why not allow him to love me? Because his will for us is that we discover who he made us to be. And it starts with asking those hard questions and being willing to hear the answers, even if they are outside of our worldview, even if they challenge what we think we know about ourselves. Those are the most important questions to ask. And I think those are the questions that we're going to be encouraged to ask. And so I was blessed even just in the first couple pages of this book. So I can't wait to see what's coming next. And we are going to be right back here, Nikki, in a week to keep on going. And the way we're going to be exploring this book is 2 of these women every week, which is going to be super fun, because I think that is bite-sized. It's manageable in the midst of crazy lives. And it also allows us to maybe compare a little bit. We'll see how they're treated. And, but yeah, so if you have not already subscribed to this podcast officially, find the Connected Life Book Club wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, I think. Anyways, you can also just go to connectedlifebookclub.com and connect with us there. Make sure to jump on our Facebook page. And Nikki and I are going to meet you right back here 1 week from today.
Can't wait.
Join us next week for more of The Lost Women of the Bible by Carolyn Custis James with Summer Shepherd and Nikki Corbin. Get involved in our Facebook group and sign up for weekly discussion guides when you visit connectedlifebookclub.com today.